Hey everyone, and welcome back to the world of Evindale. Tonight we're going to go over the Isle of Evin, probably the most mysterious of all the lands, for nothing living other than flora exists within it. You'll notice that there's a mist that goes all around the perimeter. We're going to get right into that, but first, welcome to the land of the dead, the Exile of Sythlia. It's really difficult to tell exactly what the Isle of Evin is all about, considering, as I had said, no living person has ever really set foot on it. This island to the west of the continent of Oritel and just south of Delaran, the land of the elves, is full of mystery. Any time a living person has ever attempted to step on the shores, they have either immediately died or disappeared from existence forever. There are, in Pathfinder 1.0, there's a class known as oracles, and each oracle was sometimes blinded or deafened just as part of their class. In the world of Evindale, this could have been because they had stepped foot, maybe, on the Isle of Evin at some point in their life, whether in a dream or somewhere else. But Sythlia, the supposed goddess who was exiled to this island, didn't want them there and sent them back. And so go so many of the rumors. Well, as you can see here, there are actually 9 islands, many of them known only by their ancient elven name, starting directly above me, Olvorin, the land of Olvor, or in modern parlance, Evin himself. All the way out to the west, to the left side of the map, Reir and Lithir, Othrir, Conir, Skirir, Nordgil, Fongil, and just to the south in a bay, right where I'm pointing, Vorgil. Let's get these things translated so you can see what this is and begin to unlock the mysteries of the Isles of Evin. All the way to the left, it is water, sun, moon, fire, air, earth, void, and just up here, spirit. It is rumored that when Sythlia created the world of Evindale, the universe, the physical universe as we understand it, this is where she started it. This is where she started it all. Not too much is actually known about the formation of the island because no volcanoes exist on it, at least none active that anyone has ever seen. So it's a little bit of a puzzle as to how these islands off to the west of the main island were formed, for there's no actual land linking them together as you would expect, such as a large peninsula going out with some portions directly underwater. No, these pieces of land come straight up off of the seafloor, as if they were just simply put there, like extruded out from the mantle or from the crust, the Earth's crust, Evindale's crust itself. The interesting thing is, let's go to the interactive map on this. The interesting thing about some of these islands is that they actually are those things. Now, you can take those things meaning the elements. As a matter of fact, Evi in Evindale's Elven language means element. So these are the AV. Is this where Sythlia first created all of the physical elements of sun and moon and air and earth and void, and fire and water and void and spirit? Who can say? But here we see some of the most purest examples of each of those 8 elements, starting all the way to the left. Let me zoom out. Starting all the way to the left, here we have Reir, which is really nothing more than a small collection of islands, as if the water, which this is water, but there's still land there. Now, some people who have come in via ship over this area have seen water moving in some of these small inlets and what have you. Now, we're not just talking the water lapping up on the shore, but actually taking form, as if this is is this an entry, a gateway to the land of, to the plane of water, to where the water elementals actually exist? This could be. If we continue to the east here we see Lithir. This, Lith, means sun. This is a land of sun. And this particular one, the resolution of the map, for some reason, isn't particularly great. But this is a pure white mountain. It's believed to be completely of salt. Of course, no one has ever been able to take any kind of a sample of it. But directly in front of it is a ruined tower. Now, it is believed, though there's absolutely no proof to this, with the exception of one legend that comes from just the north, the lands of the elves in Delaran, that tower was one of the first buildings ever constructed as a temple to Arios, the sun god. Directly beneath that, Othiri, Otha, in ancient Elven means moon. This is a land of perpetual shadow. The sun, no matter how bright it is, never simply shines on this island. Now, each of the hexes that you see here are about 20 miles wide. So you're looking at an island that is approximately, it's like 15 to 18 miles wide from west to east. This is a massive land of no light with the exception of twilight. Now, ships can come in very close to any of these clusters of land, including the main island itself, but you can't get too close because the moment that your keel of the boat touches any kind of a reef or sandbar that leads up to that land as it comes up out of the seabed and rises above the water, if it ever touches anything, everything in that boat immediately dies. So there are plenty of ships all around this area. The skeletons don't even exist. And each of these ships, it's almost as if the land itself or the water begins to reclaim them. There are no signs of shipwrecks because all of the materials used to create the ships are, of course, natural. Rope from hemp or what have you, and, of course, wood from trees. All of these things were once alive, and so perhaps it is then reclaimed by the Isles of Evin itself the moment it no longer serves a purpose to the living. And, of course, later on we'll get directly into how why Sythlia is believed to be here and why this is a land of death. So here we have Othiri, a land of perpetual shadow, and again Otha meaning moon in ancient Elven. Here we have Connerid. If you were able to take a look at this, here you would see that this is a very small island. It's only about 7 miles from west to east. This is a land which has been no plants or trees or anything like that would ever be able to exist on this. There's a large crack that runs where magma just constantly bubbles up. This is one of the few places where you will actually see lava outside of Dra Anan. Here, the lava does hit the crust, but it never actually hits the sea. Now, in ancient Elven, Konni means fire. So is this just like all the rest of these places? Is this an entry to the elemental plane of fire? Skirir, it's one of the few words where in English we actually do hear something, sky. Well, it's actually skir. Skir means air in the ancient Elven, and there is simply nothing here with the exception of some grass, which is there, and it blows over this past this vast chasm. Here you can see the earthen wall going down into a black void of some kind. Unsure exactly what is within it, all we know is that there's massive gouts of air that come out. Now, there are some mages who have reported, particularly elemental mages, or those that really study ores or what have you, that say that this land is really nothing more than just the materialization or the physical aspects of the actual elemental plane of air. And because directly above this, some people actually do claim to see air elementals moving in and about whatever it is that's coming out of that crevice. And why would air be coming out of the earth? There's a little bit of a mystery there, but we're talking about Sythlia, a deity with infinite powers of creation, of physical everything. So who knows? Is there an underworld that does exist from where air is generated? Is the elemental plane of air accessible from within the planet known as Evindale? That's a very good question. If I were GMing a campaign, I would say that the air elementals are here above the surface and are riding this akin to a wave. But if you were able to get in there somehow, some way, have a mastery of air so that you would be able to go past, or rather through the current, against the current of air, then you might actually be able to get down into there. We now move over to Gill, and for those of you that have followed the series before, you may have heard the goddess Nordaga referenced, especially in the Mutfia video, where Nordaga is the patron deity of that country. Nor means earth, and Gill means more of. As a matter of fact, the IR prefix, as you see in many of these things, is akin to Gill. Gill is said to be a little bit older in etymologically speaking than the IR suffix, but nonetheless, this is the Isle of Earth. All forms of trees have been documented on this, and this is one of the few places where here with these white patches are not snow, but actually the Oritel flower. Now it is said that this three-petaled, each of the petals looking like long fronds, very narrow and very, very pointy, each one about 8 to 10 inches long or so. The three-petaled flower, known as the Oritel, is said to exist only when Sythlia has actually stepped on that portion of the ground. In some places on the main continent of Evindale and elsewhere within Evindale, because remember there are two continents here, Mineshaft being the other one, it is said that Oritel flowers on occasion do pop up. But as far as everyone understands it, Sythlia is exiled to these worlds or to these islands. So where are the Oritels then coming from that people are then picking up and claiming? Now there are Oritel flowers that have been preserved, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But they do exist in abundance here on the Isle of Gill. Can you ever pick one up? No, of course not. That would require you to be able to step onto it or somehow reach over there. You can't even fly over it. Not even a bird is capable of flying over this area without either bamfing directly out of existence or dropping dead no matter the altitude. This makes travel, of course, rather precarious to these islands. So not only can't you step on it, you can't even fly over them. Here we have Gill. Gill is an interesting place. It's one of the few islands that is broken up, as you can see, with the exception of the get over here, cursor. With the exception of Rier, where it's more swamped land. It's more swamped. This looks like land that had been destroyed by something, which is rather fitting, considering that Fan means void. Void as in the absence of life. Well, granted, now there is no life here in the Isles of Evin, so this is really not too much of a surprise. But in this case, it is also the absence of magic. It is the absence of everything. It's the absence of... it is that which allows all of existence to exist by virtue of its inexistence. I can't even figure that one out, but I really like how it sounds. So I'm sure that there's an answer in there somewhere. If you guys have some philosophical ideas about it, please go ahead and let me know right here in the comments. Now, there is a structure there. Now, I just got finished saying that there's no magic here in Gill. None whatsoever. We can't even see any kind. There's no grass. There's nothing there, with the exception of some kind of a dust. It's blackish gray with a very slight green tinge to it. It is a completely foreign substance. So is this actually of Evindale, or is this a physical manifestation of something else? Because the building that rests on that island, it's long, it's conical. It has, I guess, what you can call almost like buttresses, 4 of them that come out. To our modern eyes, we might think that it looks like a 1950s version of a rocket ship or something. But in this case, it stands upright. There's one entrance to it, and those with a spyglass may be able to look at it and see ancient runes that adorn the doorway over it. Something that speaks of a temple of Yasari. Now, Yasari is interesting because there is a god by the name of Yasara, who is the deity of magic and of manipulation. So, is this an entrance to the land of void? And if so, is Yasara actually in charge of the land of void? And as a god of magic, really no other gods can exist in Evindale, supposedly, with the exception of death, which had been partially controlled by Sythlia at the murder of Evin, which I'll get into again. But does Ysara actually have a physical presence here? And is that why we see something floating here? Or is it because gravity doesn't exist and somehow, some way, there's some sort of an equilibrium? It's really going to be up to your GM or DM to figure that one out. We're going to come all the way over to the east here, now coming to Gill. Gill is the island of spirits. Now, if we go to the island view behind me, I picked this photo. I absolutely love this thing. If you look, it's akin to this right here, as if you were standing somewhere in this area looking out here. You don't see any land like such as that which is behind me in this view, like it would be up there somewhere in the distance. Instead of a horizon, you should see more land coming out beyond it. But I really like how it is full of life. It is verdant, it is green, the hills are completely covered, and this to me is what Gill has always looked like. Now, they call it the land of spirits. Well, spirits are invisible to mortal eyes in the world of Evindale, unless you can use magic to view them. Well, magic cannot be viewed, or cannot be used to see it, but on occasion, lights are seen going up and down the mountains as if they are travelers carrying some kind of a torch, but not a flame, but of some kind of a light that pulses almost like a heartbeat. And sometimes we see trails of these things coming down. Now, those who have been resurrected in Evindale are said to have undergone a variety of experiences, from plains of grass to being in a building in some kind of a cold environment, to waking up in the mountains and having to walk their way down. Is that where they actually are? And what does this physical realm actually look like in the land of the dead, with only the dead's eyes? Is there a land bridge of sorts, a way that they are able to walk from Gill, if that is where the spirits first come in? I'm going to say no, and here's why. Let's hit the mainland and take a look here. First off, take a look at the size of the island. You're looking at something that is 608.5 miles wide. This is a massive island. Let's get into some of the details here, however. Coming all the way down to the left, all the way down to the west, here we have, for crying out loud, stop it. Here we have the ruins of Bath Hadrain. This is one of the few locations where you will see, on the mainland anyway, where you will see structures. Now, there was a tower. As a matter of fact, there are two structures over in the Isles that I had already discussed. But here, the ruins of Bath Hadrain have a history, a mortal history, that everyone knows about. Bath Hadrain was one of the first priests of Sythlia, and is said to have been the only mortal in existence to ever be allowed to step foot on this island by Sythlia herself. Supposedly, this was immediately after the First Age, when humans were just being created, and Bath Hadrain was one of those. And this conflicts greatly with a lot of other legends that talk about the first humans, Vorain being one of them, and here's Bath Hadrain. So in the ancient tongues, the name seems to fit with the time, the end of the First Age and the Second Age of Evindale, with the presence of humans being the beginning of the First Age, which lasted a very long time. But it was only during the First Age that any mortal was ever able to set foot on this island. So was Sythlia alive then? Was she exiled to this world? I'm going to say no. I'm going to say that the legends and the stories about how the humans were created, and when they were created in relation to the time that she was exiled, is very different than everything else. I'm saying here that the ruins of Bath Hadrain were constructed by humans here in the Isle of Evin after, I'm going to correct myself, after the exile of Sythlia. Yeah, I believe, if I have to go back on my notes, yes, they were constructed after the exile of Sythlia to this by humans. However, was Sythlia's exile to this island was the byproduct of that exile that no living would ever be able to touch, or was there a transitional period where the living could come and visit Sythlia? That is entirely possible. I'm just going to check in on Facebook for a second here and see if you guys are. Let's see here. Okay, let me know if you guys can hear me, because I'm getting a weird kind of audio signal on this. Just type in the comments and let me know. So the ruins of Bath Drain can be seen from around this area. Can be seen from this area here as the ships come in. You can make it out through the jungles. However, once again, there's no living whatsoever. There are no statues there, but it is a massive building. It's not as large as this. Here we just see it as an icon, a representation on the map so that you can see it on the map. Otherwise, it would just be a very small dot. Coming up here as we follow the shoreline, here we have beaches, and these pure white, beautiful beaches as they are depicted here. Most of them are difficult to see due to the mist that covers all of this. It's just a very fine mist. Most of the time you can actually sail right through this area here, through the waterway directly above me on a ship. You could see everything here. And again, you don't see any birds or anything. There's no insects, but you do see plenty of plant life, and you can see through the mist. It is believed that the mists themselves are the reason why you die as soon as you step foot on it. Others say that the mists are there to protect the living from the land of the dead, and that the mists themselves are merely an illusion that provides a physical representation to your eyes, and that the Isles of Evin aren't actually there. Anyone that casts Detect Magic or in Pathfinder 2.0, read auras or what have you, you are going to pick up on stuff that has a lot to do with necromancy, extremely powerful auras of necromancy, and then after just a couple of seconds of seeing it, you simply don't see it anymore, which is completely contrary. It's not like the only time auras ever really disappear is if it is a magic item that is now removed from view, you look away or what have you, or the magic item simply was just recently there, went away and left a residual aura which gradually fades in time. The more powerful it is, the longer it takes to fade from that area. However, in this case, it actually blinks out of view as if something's saying, no, you should not be seeing this. Now, who knows? Some people who have, there are reports of sailing vessels that have come through here. Some crews got out in a rowboat along with a wizard. The wizard would cast Detect Magic, and all of a sudden it would disappear. He would take a look. To him, the mists were no longer there to his normal vision either. He leapt out of the boat and started flying and started swimming to the shore. Of course, the sailor's like, no, don't do that. It's bad luck, and you will die. And as soon as his hand touches those mists, before he can even see the mists, the particulates are there in the air, and immediately it's as if disintegration had taken place on the body with no saving throw. So, kind of horrific. Let's go back to the interactive. As we continue journeying east here over the land bridge, wrong map. As we begin journeying east here we see Feres Plains. This is inland, and yet it has a name. Some mages have figured this out, and how they are able to view the interior of this. They will fly up. They will fly straight up from anywhere in the shoreline from a boat, and as they go up, they have a spyglass with them. Or sometimes they're on magical beasts that can fly, and they don't get closer to the shore or directly above the mist, because the mist apparently forms a wall. Instead, they keep some distance away, and then using a spyglass, they're able to look down into these details. Now, this one is called Feres Plain for a reason, and now we're going to get into the story of how Sythlia was exiled. It was sometime during the First Age, and I apologize, in the other videos we go into this to some degree, but during the First Age, soon after the physical world was created, and especially humans, they were just starting to emerge. All of the races, all of the ancestries, all of the creatures of this world had existed on this in physical reality. Unfortunately for them, overcrowding began to occur because you could not die. Sythlia did not create death as a way to replenish the world, like as it is now. If a tree dies, it will eventually rot, thus supplying those nutrients back to the earth so something new can grow. Same thing with all living things. Well, in Sythlia's world, all things fed off of her divine energy. And as long as she continued to walk, that divine energy would keep everyone alive. Hence, there was no food either, because that requires the death of something. Even eating a blade of grass, of course, necessitates its dying. So when people die, sometimes they experience something incredible. They find themselves all of a sudden, as the air or the oxygen leaves their brain and everything goes black, it is immediately replaced with a white light. Those who have been resurrected or undergone raised dead, they report this. At first, it's a point of light. Well, kind of like some near-death experiences that some people claim to have here, where allegedly you can see a white light or a tunnel of some kind. Well, here, that white light is just your brain losing oxygen, and then everything goes black. But then it opens up into a verdant green world all around you, but you can't see anything. It is giant blades of grass, and you are so incredibly small. You're the size of an insect. But then you begin looking down and around, and you are conscious, you are sentient, but you have no arms, you have no legs. You are simply one blade of grass amongst quadrillions. You are in a massive plain, one of the many who have lived here before and now return to the earth. And for those that were there, they say it is very peaceful existence, knowing that you are there and that your only purpose is to live and nothing more. You need not eat or drink. You need not laugh nor cry. Your existence is simply to be. And when those spells such as resurrection or raised dead are then cast, you are taken out of those planes, and people can feel the separation from deity occurring again as they come back into the mortal world. And it is at that moment when when their soul when their spirit becomes a soul again. In the world of Evindale, I differentiate the two between spirit and soul, as a spirit being I guess a disembodied spirit. It has no body. It never had, or if it did have a body, the body is long gone, while a soul is a spirit as it exists within a body. Now, the soul can leave the body, such as astral projection or what have you, but nonetheless. So here, as your spirit begins to become a soul once more, you no longer belong here in the land of the dead. So it is then easy, I guess you could then say that spirits can exist here, but souls cannot. So that's interesting. But as you come back to your body, it is said that they come away from the plane before everything goes black, and then they open up their eyes in their mortal body again. And now, all of a sudden, the eyes begin to see. And before, it was more, you had a 360 view of everything going on all around you. Now, they call it Feres Plains because after Evin, the great consort of Sythlia, was murdered, death was introduced to the world. Sythlia was confused by this because that ending or that conclusion of life never existed as part of her plan of the world. In fact, her plan, and it is said that that's a phrase, an adage, people will toss up to her plan as if this is divine, the divine course of things. Her plan is only for life to exist, but here was death. And so when she saw this being, something known as conclusions or endings or death, now existing in her realm, this was an invasion by another god, but this was not that god's purpose. Conclusion and endings have been brought forth, summoned, if you will, by the mortal, the one individual that killed Evin. So when that happened, Sythlia realized that she was no longer a deity in sole control of everything around, and instead demanded that she have some access to the powers of conclusion, to the powers of death. And she began to rewrite life, that it would no longer, because these people dared to kill her gift to them, Evin. Because of that, she ended up cursing all of mortality by allowing death to exist. And instead of joining her in eternal peace on her land or what have you, They were now doomed to die and return to the earth from whence they had came. You know, now that I hear it, it sounds like many other religions out there. So this kind of goes right along. Anyway, that actually happened in Evindale because we can say that. It's a fantasy world. So here we have the Feres Plains. It is said to be that because when she requested the control of death in her world, that she might be able to bring Evin back to life, death was split. Death originally was just conclusions and endings, something that just brought an end to the existence of something else. It serves a purpose. The purpose is a renewal, providing that there's a balance to it with another deity, which is that of renewal. In this case, however, death had been split between Sythlia's very selfish request to have Evin come back to her, because otherwise his body was just going to start falling apart there into the earth. And while that had split into jealousy and selfishness, it also split into natural order. The very act of Sythlia saying that all things must go back into the earth and return its nutrients that they are borrowed for that very short period of time also brought about a god by the name of Feyer, the deity of natural death. Its sister, if you will, Feyen, the goddess of murderous death. And that is why those beings exist in Evindale today. Supposedly, they are mortal in the sense that they have a physical body, because this is where they were created. And all things created on the prime material plane come with a physical reality, or a tangible, something with mass. So they call this Feres Plains because this, out of all of this isle, is the only place where plains exist. And they think maybe you are one of the blades of grass here. One of the other things that wizards or those who are flying with spyglasses have been able to see is if they came over here to Founders Falls. Well, this you can see from any ship. Heck, you can get pretty close to it. You can get within, I'd say, several hundred feet to it before your ship begins to touch some of the land under the water. Founders Falls is one of the only, actually, it is the only place where water from the interior of the island comes out into the ocean. Now, through some magic, very clever magic, somebody was able to take a small vessel, send it out there with a telepathic projection, and just let it sit so that it collected the mist coming off. They had tried it before where they put it directly into the walls with like a mage hand or something along those lines, and the cup just immediately falls apart. But they're able to collect some of the mist, and it's a long, evolved process. But eventually, whatever that cup is, the mist will then, of course, condense, and you wind up with liquid in the cup. That cup or that liquid will restore health to a body or to a damaged body. And all throughout Evindale, in certain places, there are fountains or pools of water that exist where you can simply fill up your water skin with this stuff. And it's the equivalent of what in Pathfinder 1.0, and I think D&D 5e, I think that's I apologize. I actually don't know D&D 5e. And I'm hoping to learn it with some people one day. I think there's a Cure Light Wounds or something to that effect. In Pathfinder 2nd Ed, it's just a single heal spell that varies in greatness or varies in intensity as you level. It would be the equivalent of a Cure Light Wounds, depending upon the quality of the water. If it is tainted with anything else, it lessens the severity or it lessens the potency of it. If it is pure, then it is you're able to raise the dead with it. So that's pretty amazing. If you ever wanted to visit the Isle of Evin and try to collect that, you might actually have a better time or an easier time trying to find one of the lost fountains of Sythlia and get some of that water. But supposedly the water that comes out of Founders Falls is that exact same water. Now, those that were flying in this area here are able to come up and with their spy glasses able to see this, what appears to be a mine shaft. Now, this is interesting. It's a hole in the mountain. The mountain itself is light in color, as if it is covered in snow. And yet there doesn't rain much here, yet there's storms everywhere sometimes. And other times it's just a beautiful, clear blue sky. But these particular mountains, the light-colored ones here, are all snow-capped, or at least they look it. And here is an opening as if a mine shaft, now called the Mines of Evindale, exist. Now this is interesting because some of those who have been resurrected, if they did not feel that they were a blade of grass in what might be the Feres Plains, instead they woke up in a cold room, one of stone, hewn stone, blocks of stone. Imagine a room about 20 feet by 30 feet, and on one of the long sides, in the center of it, is an opening that opens up into a long stone shaft that opens up eventually to the outside. And from that outside, cold winds now blow inside of that room. And when they say that while they were in that room, they saw people that they didn't recognize wearing clothes that were not of this time. I'm going to get into another possibility regarding that in a moment. But is this shaft a place where these people are placed? And if so, what is that room? Why are they there? Why is it so cold? We see what appears to be snow-capped mountains, or are the mountains themselves just entirely white or gray in this case? What is it exactly? Now, others say that when they were in that room, they envisioned walking down that tunnel. There's that tunnel again, walking down that tunnel towards the bright outdoors light. And as they do, they come in and around and find a pathway going over a depressed area where people are frolicking in what appears to be spring. And yet, where they came out is akin to winter. So it's very confusing. But they say that maybe, somehow, some way, this is that opening. For as they journeyed out of that area and into the rest of the isle, according to what few memories people have had of the afterlife, they had to walk down a mountain in order to do that. Now, this corresponds to the same thing as Gill, where people walking down a mountain. So there's a little bit of significance with height or altitude, or perhaps with mountains themselves. Mountains, just as a quick reminder, can be naturally created through volcanic action, tectonic plate activity, or what have you, but also through the primordial dragons that Sythlia had commanded in order to press their mighty claws down into the ground and create mighty gouges where inlets would be, or push the world aside, or push the land aside in order to create mountains as they begin to buckle. So how was the island created? I think it's a little bit beyond the scope of this. How are these mountains created? Why are they different than others? A little bit beyond the scope of this, because ultimately it doesn't matter. This is a place of mystery, and it can have any reason behind it if that's what you, as a creator, would like to do with this area. So there are the Mines of Evindale. Now, I had told you that there were people that are wearing different clothes and not of this time period. If we go all the way to this west, here we see something that looks like stone blocks. Large stone blocks that seem to form something of a walkway, yet these stones, according to the people who are looking at them, are massive. These things are about a mile wide each. So are these for the giants that used to live in this area? What exactly are they? They look like giant stone blocks with no windows, no doors. So are they buildings for the dead? Are they paved stones, pavers, for those beings that used to live here before Sythlia had turned this into, or was forced to turn this into, a place of exile? We don't know. But if you're floating high in the sky, and this is 20, 40, 60, 80, 100 miles off, somehow, some way, if you're able to see it, maybe you can see these things. And maybe one day, magic will come about where you're able to pick out something moving there. Because every now and then, lights can be seen moving as if it is the glow of a spirit itself. Now, if we continue west here, there is a very strange object which no one in Evindale has ever seen, and it is this right here. This is a modern house. something straight out of the 21st century or even the 19th century. Its architecture is nothing that is seen anywhere else in Evindale. There are plenty of Tudor buildings and what have you, but this seems to be what to our eyes would be a modern building. And this has been described, this black line here, they called it a path of black, a black stone that had been laid down. Is that asphalt? And is the Isle of Evin a home to all of the dead through all of the ages of Evindale? I would say yes, it is. Now let's continue. Coming back over here is Reg's willow. Reg was a druid. In this case, he had come from Tala. Reg was one of the wisest of the archdruids that had ever existed. And it was said that Reg was one of the first druids who had posited that druids are the modern priests of Sythlia. Before the ruins of Bath Hadrain were created, or excuse me, after the ruins had, after Bath Hadrain died, and he was an actual cleric of Sythlia, the clerics of Sythlia pretty much ceased to exist. Now, they started coming back in the later ages, let's say like the Third Age and the Fourth Age, and certainly within the Fifth Age, when new gods begin to appear. There was a movement there to have Sythlia be restored to her right, and clerics, actual priests, started coming about. But everything in the Third and Fourth Age, really, if it was about Sythlia, it was really about the druids. The druids themselves were the priests because they worshiped nature. They worshiped Nordaga. They worshiped Sythlia and other beings that had represented nature, such as the Edai, which controls waters. So Reg, in this case, he was one of those that had flown, and here is this, it's actually right over here, is where he had flown straight up and was able to see through mountain peaks and see a massive willow that was in some kind of some kind of a marshland. And here he was able to see, at this massive distance, he was able to see Fae dancing around it. This was the only account that comes from a credible source anyway, of actual beings that were able to be seen that were more than simple motes of light. It was called Reg's Willow because, unfortunately, some people believe that a willow tree shouldn't even exist as tall as that thing is. It is about 20 miles wide. This is one of the few icons on the map, one of the few symbols here that is actually to scale. The canopy of this willow is massive. It would be the equivalent of a world tree. This willow is said to be one of the first homes of the elementals themselves, and from it were born the Fae when Sythlia caused that evolution. So if we begin to take a look here, a whole picture begins to develop. According to the stories that of those who have had raised dead cast upon them, or those that have witnessed magnificent things, such as Reg himself. Well, this could very well be the place where Sythlia first created the Fae, and maybe somewhere in here, a Fae was touched and Evin himself was created, or maybe this is also where the elves were created. Although when we cut into when we do the Delaran video, you may get a little bit of a different story because it'll be told by from the point of view of the elves, the most ancient of beings that we would consider today playable race. We come now down to a little bit to the southeast and here to the Circle of Glass. This is the last of the structures that you would see. Now, from its distance, it's quite some distance inland. You're looking at, let's see here, about 20, 40, 60 miles in or so. And that's only over here. You have mountains which are barring this. It's really only over here where you'll be able to see it. And even then you're looking at 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120 miles. It's an incredibly long distance, especially for just, standard telescopes or spyglasses to be able to make out exactly what this is. But it appears to be a circle of glass monoliths giant crystals that every now and then glow. And from that glowing energy from within, a mote of light comes out. Is this another place where the dead enter into this world? We don't know, but it could be, because some, again, who have said raised dead, have light come out. Now, they don't recall a hallway, such as in the mines of Evindale. They don't recall always coming down a mountain, such as on the Isle of Spirits. Instead, they just have light, or even grass, such as in Feres Plains. Instead, there's simply light, and then they move out from beyond that. Is this the circle of glass? Well, as it turns out, there is a place just like it in Delaran, and there, life can cease to exist temporarily. It simply doesn't exist anymore. Anyone who walks into it disappears, just like they do when if you attempt to touch the mists that guard all of the shores of this Isle of Evin. But they're able to come back. They have no memory at all of what they experienced, other than the feeling that no time had passed. Every time that they walk into this crystal-like circle of monoliths, and the elves are not exactly sure that it's actual crystals. They think it's actually not something that they think it's if it is crystal and it behaves like crystals, but it is as hard as rock. It's not as hard as your typical quartz crystal or something like that, and it's definitely not diamonds. So they're not sure exactly what this material is. It's the only place where it only appears in that one place that they are aware of. There may be other collections of this stuff somewhere, maybe underground in massive caverns or what have you. Certainly Forngarth Cavern has yet to be fully explored, so maybe it exists there in the spine. But in the meantime, they believe that the Circle of Glass is the same thing, and that could be one of the entryways into the Isle of Evin. A mortal able to walk. Of course, they lose their body and they become a spirit. No one has ever had a body actually exist here, although some GMs have. I've heard some stories that one GM that I know of for a fact allowed somebody to touch the Isle of Evin, and actually walk upon it. So who's to say, it's I only design it. You guys are the GM or the DM, and if you decide in your imagination that you can go into Delaran, that you can walk through this monolith, or that you can land on the shores of Evin, the only thing I would say is make it magical, make it mystical, make it worth the journey in order to actually get here. Now we're just going to move over to this word right here. Evindale is one of the, I guess we can call it one of the first languages, or a word from the first language, at least according to the elves, whose language is the eldest. Evindale does not have a real translation to it. Its definition seems to have been lost in time, but it does sound remarkably like Evin or Evorin, Evin. Evindale, they believe, was the actual Sythlian term for element, and hence they call this, or rather the collection of the elements, they call this the Island of Elements, or all elements being that of Sythlia. And so in ancient Elven, Sythlia means elements. We don't actually know her real name. So is this the Island of Evindale, or the Exile of Sythlia? If that is something you ever wanted to explore, one of the ways you might be able to do that is have the characters go to the Codex Distinel, which exists in the capital city of Avar in the country of Ivari. Maybe there, in this magical book, this massive magical book, self-writing with a quill that records anything noteworthy that has ever taken place in the world. Maybe there in its first chapters, we can then find out what Sythlia's real name is. And if you happen to find out Sythlia's real name, can you then summon her to a different place where maybe then she walks and leaves Oritel Flowers behind as a slight vacation away from the land of the dead? It's interesting when we call the Isle of Evin the land of the dead, it's actually the land of eternal life. but mortal bodies can't exist there. That's the great irony. The goddess of all of physical creation cannot have a mortal body in her own home. So there you go. There's the overview of the Isles of Evin, and I hoped you liked this one. I'm going to turn over to Facebook and see if you guys have responded with anything. Excellent. Thank you for telling me that you can hear me and that this wasn't a waste. Damien, yes, I'm glad that you think that this is a really awesome area. By the way, I still have something for you, and I never shipped it out, and I am so oh man, I am so sorry that I did that. Cure Light Wounds in 5e works by curing 1d8 and an additional 1d8 for a higher spell slot that you use. Okay, cool. So Pathfinder Pathfinder 2nd Ed now has a single heal spell, and depending upon your level, it'll then evolve into something a little bit more powerful as you go up. Anyway, guys, if anyone, and I see 4 people are watching, that's awesome. If any of you have any questions or anything like that, by all means, go ahead and ask. I'd love to answer whatever it is that you happen to have. And I see, is that my cousin? I see my cousin on here. That's pretty cool. Hi, Sean. So, this is what I do. I'm a geek, professional geek. So if you guys like what you have here, feel free to ask questions about it. Give me some ideas of how you would use this in your campaign. I'm really, really curious how you guys would be able to use it. And if you want the high-resolution version, which I did not use as the background to this video, you can go up to Patreon. If you join at the $5 level, it's just about $5 a month. You'll get this and every other map that I have ever created for this series, all in 4K or better. And that includes the world map, the spine, Mutvia, Dra'anan, and others that I have created. And you will now have this one there. They are typically released at around 8:30 p.m. on Monday nights. The next video, well, we're going to have to poll it. If you go to if you're watching this, you're obviously on the actually no, that's right, because I do post this up on YouTube. So if you go to the Evindale, the World of Evindale Facebook page, from there you'll be able to get to the community, the player community known as I only created this damn thing. What the hell is it called? It's the Inn, the Fortune's End. So I'm tired. I have only had 1 cup of coffee today. But if you join the Fortune's End, we will have a poll there as to what countries are going to be detailed next, in which case that'll be in 2 weeks. So until then, I will see you guys later. Thank you so much for joining this, and I hope you like this video. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe and also click that bell to receive notifications when we post new videos. Until then, we will see you guys tomorrow night with a new playtest of Pathfinder 2nd Edition, using the characters. We're going back to the characters from the Black Wraith Chronicles, the YouTube series, and who knows, maybe some of this information which I'm putting out in these videos will be used at some point. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, guys. Take care. Have a great night.